Three. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Seduction Show. Today I have a very special guest who only goes by one name for privacy matters. His name is Filip, and I'll introduce you to him in a minute. Just setting a context here or a frame, this fits into a series of interviews I'm doing with men that are inspiring me, have inspired me, are fascinating me, are provoking my thoughts. And Filip fits really into that, you know. Who Filip is for me is a friend. We know each other for must have been 2006 or something like this, I think. 2008 maybe. So it's been a while. And who Filip is for me is a guy who's really dedicated, committed to his truth. He's a very particular man who doesn't walk the path that society tells him to walk. And he's very much going his own way, very much a warrior in that sense, and developed his own very much own ideas around society, around culture, around men and women, around what are we here to do, and it resulted in a very specific path to unlike many other men, he's not abiding by society's rules, and he's been a traveler, he's been a public speaker, he's been a entrepreneur, he's into solar energy, and has many polymath kind of ideas about the world. So I'm very excited to have him here today, and just pick his brain a little bit more, because over these more than a decade now, he really has provoked my thoughts every time we talk, and it's not always comfortable, and that's good. You know, I'm very challenged, and we meet certainly on certain ideas, and on other ideas it's been very thought-provoking for me. And so I wanted to use this podcast, the other format, to maybe come and get to know him better from a different angle, you know, because I'll be the one interviewing and ask him a couple of questions. I suspect, being close friends as we are, it could become a bit more dynamic and going back and forth. But I love this format and the ability or the possibility I get to ask him a couple of questions I haven't really asked before. So welcome, Filip, to the Seduction Show.
Well, thank you very much, Hans, for the introduction and for having me. I'm curious what comes out.
Well, I got a couple of questions just to get us going. Well, first of all, what are you? Let me ask you this: What are you doing these days? Before we look a bit back at your story and what's on the horizon, what's most pregnant for you these days? What are you looking at right now?
Well, I have to say, after 2.5 years of imprisonment by lockdowns, that kind of really messed with me, because it kind of interrupted my life in a very special way. Never in the history of my life, or probably in modern times, was humanity locked down for such a long time. So in my case, that resulted in me being locked down in a country that I don't like, trying to protect my parents. Then in the first lockdown, I lost my dad, which was pretty hard. And then, I helped my mom transition into her new life without her husband. And then, there was just no way to travel anymore for a person like me. So my priority now was like, let's get the hell out of here and travel again, because this has always been my motivator, the things that get my energy flowing, and therefore my inspiration. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely my priority right now, to get the energy back and get the inspiration flowing again, so I can feel dynamic again, you know. Yeah, and
Are you saying that travel to you is essential to that flowing, that inspiration?
exactly, because for me, with every place I visit has a different type of energy, so a different kind of collective consciousness there too. So automatically, that new environment will challenge me, first of all, which I really really need, and which will influence my thoughts. So it's absolutely crucial, because if I stay too long in the same place, like everything starts becoming stagnant, like stagnant water, like it becomes dirty and unclear, you know. So yeah, I'm a bit of a visionary, and my main substance is ideas and visions. So without travel, it's simply not possible. It's not enough to be a good thinker or to read books or whatever. You need different environments, different collective consciousness with different, which all have their own priorities, their own stuff going on. And it's like, absolutely crucial for a person like me. Yeah.
What's the country you didn't want to be in, and where are you now?
Belgium. You know, Belgium is my country of birth, and I never felt like I fit in there. You know, it's a country which is, well, a collective which is obsessed with safety and security and predictability, and it's mainly about, you know, making money and going to work. And then I would say the main hobby of people is going to restaurants and stuff their faces, you know, which is definitely not something I share. I mean, I like food, but like, no, like that's not my thing. So I have completely different priorities. I used to be a songwriter. You know, like I said, like my substance was always immaterial. You know, the ideas, the music was about, you know, infusing people with certain feelings and ideas and stuff like that. So I'm not a materialist. I like, I love the invisible, you know, feelings, ideas, you know, things that you can't touch, but at the same time, that might be 1,000 times more powerful than anything material. So being born in a country like Belgium, you know, the core of the Western European world, you know, it was an absolute nightmare. And as soon as I could get out, I did. But yeah, with this whole, what should I call it? With this whole lockdown stuff that, you know, was probably organized. I got caught. I got caught because I had to choose between my freedom and saving my parents, and I chose to save my parents, or to at least protect them, which I don't regret, but I paid quite the price for it, because they stole basically 2.5 years of my life. And I'm still in recovery, actually. Yeah, it was quite the shock, you know, because of the time that it lasted. Like, I could have probably done like easily half a year or maybe a year, but 2.5 years nonstop, where you can only go to the supermarket, that does weird shit to your head, I can tell you that. So yeah, as soon as I could, I got the hell out of there, you know.
Tell me a little bit more about what it did with you. You said a shock. What does it do with your head? What does it do with your soul? I'm asking because I found a way, you know, to kind of like, and I almost felt like I escaped last minute a couple of times, you know. So I wasn't.
I had that choice too, but my dad was 89, my mom was 78. My dad was, experiencing heart problems. His lungs were filling with water. So even if theoretically I had the choice to escape as you did, I just couldn't leave my parents in that state because they were just too old, and I was the only child they had left. So I had to make that decision. And I knew something really bad was coming anyway. I mentally prepared for it, but it wasn't enough. So what does it do to a person like me, and probably a lot of people? Well, first of all, I don't have a real job or a marriage or children. Freedom was always my priority. And travel is substantial in that kind of freedom, like to free movement,
Yes.
And all of a sudden, all of that was taken away in no time, So they shut the whole world down. And the first few months, I was like, oh yeah, interesting. Let's see what that does to me. And I'm always like up for a challenge, like I love a challenge. So I'm like, yeah, let's see what's going to happen, how long it's going to take. What effect it's going to have on me. So in the beginning, I looked at it as a game, But then, yeah, you started to see like this is not like anything that they promised. They're like, yeah, let's just do it for a month and 2 months, and then let's push it hard, and then we'll all be free again, and all that nonsense. It didn't happen at all, and only the opposite happened. So we went from the first lockdown to the second, and so it isolated me in a very special way. I think it was the first and only time in my life where I felt lonely, because I'm alone most of the time because I choose to. I love being a bachelor and being single and traveling and meeting girls all over the world. But in this case, yeah, like it was me in my house. And the only place I was able to go was to the supermarket, So imagine that for 2.5 years. That's a prison sentence, So it disappointed me so deeply. My faith in humanity was already weak for years, because I saw how easy humanity was to be manipulated. Like it was just so easy. But what I suspected for such a long time became worse. It like how easily humanity just rolled over with these masks and all this nonsense that they came up with. All logical thinking, all critical thinking out the window, if it was ever there, I wonder, So the end result for me was, yeah, okay, I suffered from my isolation, but the worst thing for me was that my disappointment in humanity as a species was now total. I lost all motivation to improve the world. Like that was my whole mission. I tried to improve the world through coaching, through this solar energy thing. Like everything that I did was asking myself the question: what could have the biggest leverage on improving the world? And after that 2.5 years, I'm not even motivated to do anything anymore in service of humanity because, like, excuse me, what the hell was that? No resistance, families being torn apart for this nonsense. I've seen, the ugliest, something that I suspected, like this civilization thing. I always suspected this is a very thin layer that could disappear, with anything that shocks humanity. It could just disappear in one day, And that's what happened. People lost their humanity, So yeah, it was devastating for me.
I would love to know more about where you're at in terms of like. I remember us talking to a mutual friend, and there was a picture of us 10 years ago, and I asked what has happened in short in those 10 years, and you shared with us, well, I got a lot less illusions. So I would love to talk about this, but before we get there, I would love to hear a bit more about that visionary in you and how that came up as a young man, I don't know where it started, and what that vision was that you had. Like, let me maybe be more specific. Um, since when do you see yourself as, say, a visionary?
Well, it takes time when you grow up to integrate labels and But the first thing my first feeling that I remember as a child, maybe I was 3 years old, maybe four, was me looking up at my parents and then later in school to my teachers and thinking or feeling like everything is wrong here. They send me to the wrong place or the wrong plane or planet or whatever you want to call it. Everything is upside down here. But I was of course way too young to put labels. Like at that point your mind is not developed, but the very first feeling was like everything is wrong. I gotta get the fuck out of here. Of course you can't, you're born
What did you say? What did you say? You said this before. I was brought to the wrong planet, or I shouldn't be here. Or what is that?
Yeah, I was brought. They sent me to the wrong place. Yeah, because I saw the people that were supposed to take care of me as insane, as dangerous, as I didn't have the labels for it now, but I didn't trust these people claiming to be my parents. I didn't trust these people claiming to be my educators. They were using like a fake kind of authority to push down on you and to push you left and right and whatever. They didn't get any respect from me from the very beginning, because I was like, these people are corrupted in some way. I didn't have these words because I was too young, but I could just sense it or feel it.
And you didn't. That seems to come also with, and maybe I'm going too short to the turn here, but it seems to come with a belief in yourself that you did have an inner authority. You're not trusting their authority.
I think I was born with a very strong inner authority, and then when my brother came along 2 years later, he had it at least as much or even more, So then we started amplifying that because he had the exact same feeling, but for him it showed up much more in the real world because he was an extrovert, so he just exteriorized his feelings, So he would get beat up every day by my parents, by the teachers, whatever, because he couldn't shut up. I was an introvert. I was scared, so I just internalized everything. But both of us together, we had for some reason, we were born with a very strong compass, sense of direction, whatever.
Amplified by each other then also.
Yeah, very much so. Luckily, we had each other because, only one of us survived, unfortunately, but I would not have survived my youth without him. I remember at 10 years old, I was already heavily depressed, praying that some stone or meteorite would just fall on me and end it all, So it was I just didn't want to be here because it was like a nonstop scary experience to see my brother being beat up and every day and like everything was just wrong. And then you go to school and everything we were taught, I felt like that's not true. I don't think so, So then you start picking up on the things that you learn, and you, not only do you have no interest, but your intuition is screaming like that's not true. Like what we're learning here. So I had no interest, and then your parents push more on you, and they like telling you you're stupid and you're only good to go to the factory. You'll never speak another language, But I had no interest in this whole linear brainwashing program experience. I felt, and my brother the same, we felt like we shouldn't be here. We looked at the gates of school like we're locked up, we're in a prison, like that's how it looked. So from the very beginning, like I was like, how the fuck are we going to escape this,
Because that sounds very say rebellious, for lack of a better word, like disagreeing with what is. When did visions come, or when did it turn, if at all? when did this turn into, like, instead of saying no to the current way, when did you start having ideas about how it could or should or will be?
I think when I started to accumulate power, because while growing up, I was really bullied a lot, you know, until I was 12 years old, bullied a lot and attacked because I was such an introvert. So then at 13, I was always very good in sports. So I deflected my stress and my fear into sports, you know, started with gymnastics, then karate and all this stuff. And then at 13, I decided to do something that I was sure I was bad in. You know, I was a very skinny kid. And I was like, yeah, let's go to the gym because I'm sure that will be a proper challenge. I was looking at my skinny arms and everything. So at 13, I decided to go to the gym. And my body responded quite quickly. And by the time I was 16, all the bullying was over, you know. No one, together with my brother, which was not skinny, he was like built like a gladiator, you know. No one was bullying us. On the contrary, you know, people were quite scared of us because we put in some school demonstrations there, kicked a few bullies' asses, you know, put them in the garbage cans upside down and stuff like that. So after a few demonstrations, that was it. So then for the first time, I could feel like, yeah, I have power also, you know. But even then, when we compared our power to the other kids, it was very different. Like we would use our power to protect the weaker kids. The other kids that got power were just like bullies and whatever. So there was something fundamentally different there. Or yeah, and so I guess through the physical, through building up my body, I gained the confidence. You know. And then later, yeah, we went into modeling and just beamed our powers together. So we could see, you know, or at least me being the visionary, I could see I have a dream, I have a vision, and then, you know, 1 year, 2 years later, that shows up in my life. You know, when I dreamt of, you know, having an Italian motorcycle, boom, all of a sudden it showed up. The modeling career, boom, it showed up. So I realized, like, wow, my visions are not only clear, but they have, yeah, they show up in the world. You know, we were very like, I remember when with school we had to go to Paris. Me and my brother, we went to the modeling agencies, and all the other kids just, I don't know what the fuck they were doing, peep shows, whatever. And we came back with a modeling contract from in Paris. Like I remember the teachers looking at us like, "Who the fuck are these guys?" You know. So you know, you start realizing my thoughts and my visions are not fantasy. I can make those things show up in my world, in my experience. You know. So yeah, the more of that happened, the more I could see, yeah, I can create whatever I want. Of course, then much later came also the concept of be careful what you wish for, because everything you bring into this world, you have to take responsibility for. That came later, of course. So then I became a little bit more careful with bringing my visions into the world because they came with side effects, you know. You know.
Speaking of those, but when I hear, it's a great thing, you know, that vision came with with growing power, and I think it's very controversial but very important. Nietzsche talks about, you know, develop your will to power. Develop your will to power. That's the thing you got to do, you know. So very interesting. But when I hear you talk about visions, I hear you talk about, you know, Italian motorcycles and modeling career. Did at some point you also have visions beyond the you and the here and now?
Well, yeah, like something very unexpected happened when I was almost 21, you know. My brother died from a motorcycle accident. And from one day to the other, I didn't care about any of that shit anymore, you know. Like I dumped everything, like going to the gym, modeling, sports cars, all those things that we were focused on, the material exterior world. I just dropped into the biggest depression ever, you know. So I went from being completely focused on the outside world to completely going inside, you know. Because like there was one thing that I couldn't figure out. Like the more I was focused on the material world and the more perfect I looked and whatever, the more insecure I became, you know? So in that way, much, much later, I understood why women are usually more insecure than men. It's because society forces them to focus on their exterior. So I learned through my depression then, if you want to keep people insecure, force them to focus on their bodies and their exterior. You know? So I was forced in a depression of a small decade. You know, I explored hell, and I learned, like, as bad as I felt going through that depression, I got more confident. Like I started to realize who I was, and I just kept on pushing my boundaries and exploring darkness more and more and more. And by the time I was 30, when I decided, okay, it's I'm done with this experiment of exploring hell or whatever you want to call it, you know, because at a certain point I just felt like life is pushing me down. Don't resist. Let's put some more weight and go down with it, you know, go down with the whole movement. There was no winning that, you know, I just, for some reason, you know, was. And then, okay, it took me 2 years to come out of that. It was because at a certain point you're attached to your depression. You understand the gift of it also. Like depression is a gift because it redefines you in the most profound way. It shows you many, many things, like we're not our thoughts, we're not really our personality, etc., etc. So it took me, 2 years, because in the beginning you don't want to come out of that. You're attached to your own depression. So I made a whole ritual. I made a song to say goodbye to my precious depression. I made a song that was called My Precious Fear. Yeah. And I let it go. I let everything go. I was making music at the time. The only thing I was doing actually, was making music and reading spiritual books. So I just let it all go and decided to come back into the, let's say, the more of the material world, naked, because everything was stripped, you know, everything. I lost everything in that depression. So when you come out of that, you're a completely different being. It's like I always consider that this my second life after 21. I went through like a rebirth. I survived, and this is like a second life without changing my body. You know, I had the luck that I didn't have to change my body.
You count right after 21 or after the depression?
Well, I had a total breakdown at 23, like where I completely collapsed physically, mentally, spiritually. And I was a few weeks in a very critical situation, 43 degrees of fever. And I had like a very strong spiritual experience there coming out of that, you know. So that was like what you can read in some books, the rebirth, you know, because I surrendered myself completely. I was ready to go. And then something very mysterious happened to me, which, you know, some people call enlightenment or whatever, you know. Or like for 3 months, I was in some kind of superior consciousness, and it stuck with me. A part of that stuck with me. You're never the same after that. So I would say after 23, after that experience of total breakdown, that was my rebirth, and this is like, my second life, where my visionary thing, my intuition, all these things got revealed to me. They became conscious, and I could use them in awareness. I could use them consciously, where before it was just an unconscious thing, you know. I would get warnings, I would get whatever, but I was filled with fear, and I couldn't use that stuff consciously. It's like you're being woken up to yourself, you know, which is an extremely brutal experience, you know. It's hard to describe because it's not part of psychology or whatever, you know. It's a transcendent experience, I would say. But in some books, some religious or the Buddhists even talks about it or whatever. So yeah, it's like I had the privilege to get into a second life and keep my body, basically. That's the most simple way I can say it. And when you decide to stay here, because some people don't decide when they go through that, you can consciously decide to leave or to stay. But when you decide to stay, you kind of need to find an anchor and then start up a new kind of life, you know.
Yeah,
Which I did. It was hard. what I
You
did.
said you
It
had
took
the
me 2 years.
visionary and the intuition, and I could use it now consciously. And you
Yes.
said, I'm looking for an anchor. So I'm very, how did you, what anchor did you find, and how did you use, say, your gift?
It's funny. Some of these people find it in food, and I found it in I would say sexual energy, the feminine. So I put my anchor there. It was, but there, of course, there's always a price to pay for your anchor, of course. But yeah, my anchor was the feminine and the polarity that I can create with the feminine and the sexual energy. That was definitely. So from that point on, let's say 30 years old, I started exploring, me in relationship to the feminine, but really in many ways with a lot of depth, a lot of contrast, many types of women, like everything I could possibly explore, beyond my own personal shame or guilt or whatever society puts on us.
I notice as you're saying this, and I want to go there, but I notice a little smirk on your face or laughing. What do you think that is?
Well, I'm looking back to all the stuff that I did and the things that happened. There were very big extremes there, it was very rich. But yeah, if you go beyond what society finds acceptable and even beyond your own leftovers, the leftovers of your bringing up, like the shame and the guilt and the religious stuff you were brought up, like I could feel myself pushing through those barriers. So yeah, I'm laughing because it was quite uncomfortable at the time. There was a lot of discomfort, because if you want to do things with awareness, it's not the same as escapism. A lot of playboys or a lot of men lovers of women go through that unconsciously, and then you can lie, you can cheat, whatever. But if you do something consciously, you decide not to lie, you decide not to cheat, you decide to expand your boundaries in full respect for the other humans around you, which is a whole different experience than just being clever and tricky and all the tricks that we can learn to seduce the feminine. So I decided to do that in a conscious and with integrity, which is a whole different game. If you decide to stare the other woman straight in the eye and speak your truth, and it's not the same experience. So that's why like I'm laughing, because it was so freaking intense, and there was so much transformation for me and the women that I met, and it was I pushed myself hard. It was rich, very, very rich.
Transformation, you say? Was that a driving force in, say, playing your part in the polarity dance between men and women?
I wanted to liberate women, basically, because I found that this capitalistic, hyper-materialistic world that we live in, I found that sooner or later we're going to destroy ourselves with this. The feminine is so suppressed, and I found out through my seductions and whatever that I had the capacity to, because I'm not possessive, I'm not jealous, to liberate a woman, whether it's sexuality, mentally, whatever leverage points I could find in a woman, I would do that, because if the feminine doesn't get reintegrated in this world, I feel, we're all going to shit, the societies will go to shit, because if the only thing that matters is performance and the whole nurturing thing is forgotten, and women just have to get into their masculine energy and compete with men, this will end in catastrophe. So I found, I have the power to do that. So that's what I'll do. So that started by saying, okay, you leave every woman better than how you met her, but also going beyond that, like knowing what you have to offer, and liberate any woman you decide to come into contact with. So it's very different. it's very challenging, you know, because if you bring out a woman's demons, a woman's shame and all that stuff, you will be the emotional boxing ball. So you have to be prepared to suffer for her somehow, you know, because all those demons, they have to come out, you know, and then you are their subject, you know, because they're not ready to take responsibility. So they're all going to dump it on you. So it's quite intense. It's quite heavy, but it's somebody's got to do it. And I have the gift to do it. So yeah, I rarely talk about this stuff, but I still believe, like, if the feminine does not get rebalanced in societies, the societies that fail to do that will self-destruct. I'm 100% sure of that. So that's my contribution.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So did you feel like someone, because I hear you say someone had to do it, and you pick up that load, so to speak. How was that for you? Was that reluctantly, or did you also?
It was scary as it was scary as hell. Because as much as I love to play with feminine, I was clearly steered by by another force in me. Like it was going beyond my ego, because if you bring woman to the edge of, you know, to their edge, like they're gonna suffer, and my pain is seeing them suffer, but they have to, because it's part of the process of awakening. You know, it's part of the process then of they have to let go of all that stuff. So I was struggling with so much guilt and even shame and all those things. But this other part of me just kept pushing me. No, keep going. And I could only see the results in a few years of those women, you know? So you're going through this horrendous experience somehow, and you only get to see the results in a few years. But as that plays out, the more results you see, the more confident you become. So you learn to release your shame, your guilt, you learn to get rid of it. And you know, okay, there's an intelligence working here through me, which has nothing to do with my ego, which I just have to allow. So stop resisting, you know, it's almost like a calling, you know, like you say yes or no, you know. And when you say yes, well, you know, the beginning of that is quite horrendous.
Yes.
Because it challenges you so badly, you know.
Like, are you saying what you're saying now about like seeing what's possible? Did you have that as a vision, or is it more in hindsight that you can?
It was given to me. It was given to me as a vision, because to me, visions are not our own. To me, my visions have always been given to me. I call it my higher self, whatever you want to call it, but it was given to me, and then it was mine to accept or reject. And because I had so much curiosity and probably love for the feminine, I decided to say, yes, I will be a tool for that. But when that actually starts in the beginning, yeah, it's too intense, because you bounce against all your personal ego limitations and boundaries. And then when you're able to push through that, yeah, and you see the results and you see what you accomplish with these people, with these women, yeah, it gets better and better and better. But it's never going to be a party to bring people to their demons, to show them their demons, and to put them on the edge. It's never going to be a party, you know? Like,
tell us a little bit more, Filip, about the vision that informed, say, the calling to you playing the part with the feminine in this way. What's the vision you had? What's the vision that was given to you?
To bring balance, to reveal women, to help them rediscover what feminine energy is, that they're supposed to be in their hearts, not in their heads. The man is supposed to be the protector, and in protecting them, they can lower their energy back to their hearts and become feminine again, and rediscover what feminine energy is. They don't have the luxury anymore in Western societies to explore that, because now they have to compete in the working place and in all sorts of things with the men. So they, even in relationships, women they compete with their own men, you know, so everything is going to shit. Like in Belgium, we have an 80% divorce rate in 5 years, like depression, suicide, whatever. There's no more harmony between the feminine and the masculine, because women have lost their own essence, feminine energy. They look at feminine energy now as weakness, you know. So I'm putting a layer of protection around them where they can, you know, release all their demons and nonsense, and where they can go back to the softer energy but very potent energy of femininity. They can rediscover it, because the younger women are born with no concept of what that is. They have no example of what that is. And yeah, I have the gift to do that because I have very strong masculine energy. Women feel protected very quickly around me. And then, yeah, I put like a layer around them and they can explore it. You know? They can
So
rediscover.
how present are you in those moments to say, on the one hand, saving her, so to speak? Maybe saving is the wrong word. And how much are you present to say saving humanity?
I think I'm just doing my part, and I can only hope there's other men like me, because obviously one person, but it's about the ripple effect, like it was shown to me, like, because I was thinking like, how much can I do with one woman? But I was always meeting these women that have a huge impact around them. They have a huge network, and all of a sudden, yeah, I started to realize the ripple effect of waking up one woman to her own femininity and herself, the ripple effect it has on specific women with huge networks, with huge influence, because I was always meeting these alpha women that were used to dominating and controlling the masculine, you know, and then they met me and they couldn't, and they fucking lost their minds, you know. So, and through that process of their inner crisis meeting me, they couldn't, for some reason, they couldn't run away because they were too attracted to me somehow. So they stayed, and then we go through that. But then I could see after that the ripple effect it has on all her girlfriends and her future relationship with the masculine or whatever. So it's interesting how life does it things, because if you influence the right person, like there's like a huge ripple effect towards others. So it's hard to calculate that, but
Yes.
yeah. It's quite impressive after all these years to see some of those results, you know. So yeah, I mean, this whole world is about polarity, and whenever there's huge imbalances in society is when disaster strikes, and people underestimate like how important, you know, those energies are, masculine and feminine. Now they're trying to equalize the whole thing. Like that's just wow. I don't even know how that stuff is going to end, you know. But polarity is a substance of this reality. So
let me poke you a bit more here, because as well, you know also that I feel a strong calling to play my part in the reinvention of relationships. This could be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm expecting your answer would be close to what you've just been saying. So that's why I want to ask you here. I feel very called to play my part in the reinvention of relationships, faced with the idea that relationships are a number one predictor of our happiness and health, scientific study of Harvard, and at the same time that most relationships end in suffering, both romantic relationships, you know, and 90% of the time with one person saying, I never want to see you anymore, you know. Families are crumbling, communities are crumbling, nations are fighting, you know. So at least we could do it better. You know, the way we've been relating is crippled at best and quite tragic if you just look at it. But I'm asking men who have dedicated, and women who have dedicated at least a part of their life looking at this, you know, and I'm asking them two questions, and I want to ask you, Filip. One, why do relationships end in so often in suffering? You know, what are we doing wrong? And two, what can we do about it? What are we doing wrong, and what can we do about it? What would be your number one
Well, it's unconsciousness. It's like everything. People are trapped in this cage called good and bad, you know? We're programmed into this. So the only way out of the prison of good and bad is awareness, is consciousness. So whatever you do, there is basically no good and bad. We can both do the same thing, and the person that is aware will do the same thing, and it will have good consequences. The person that is unconscious will do the exact same action into the world, and it will lead to catastrophe. And this is what people don't understand. Why do relationships don't work? Because both people are unconscious, and they're looking to find something in the other person. They're basically saying, I refuse to love myself, but I demand it from you, you know, which is insanity, you know? So let's say that's exactly what I'm doing. If I go into unconsciousness in a relationship, I know that I can stay aware, and therefore the person that is aware has a capacity to heal. An ideal relationship is two people that are aware, and they can transcend the whole relationship together, you know? But if one of the two is already aware, healing can take place. Let's say 99% of all relationships are both partners are unaware, and therefore, by definition, will end in catastrophe, you know? Even if they make a deal, which, you know, the best relationships do, they make a deal and then they die together, you know? They just fucking suffocate together. So the solution is individual work to bring yourself to awareness, to awaken yourself. And then you know what you have to offer. You know that love is about giving, not about taking. There's nothing to find in that other person. You know what you have, and you have the pleasure of sharing that with another conscious being. And then, you know, the magic happens, you know? So there is no good and bad. There is only, are you doing your thing in awareness, or are you doing it in unconsciousness? So, yeah, like people need to get out of this prison of good and bad. This is child stuff, you know? This is, as long as people, if I hear people talk about good and bad, I know they're locked up in unconsciousness. It's just, yeah.
It's what Michael, well, the work we do is exactly this, is the changing, we could talk about this later, but the changing judgment as a navigating tool to honor. Judgment being, I like, I dislike, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, into like walk in the person's shoes, see what they're facing and see what they stand for, and then be able to honor them, you know, for that. And very interesting. Let me ask you this, Filip, before we go on. You said here awareness, you speak about awareness, and you say awaken yourself. So I was going to ask you what you mean by awareness, and you say awaken yourself. Earlier, you said awaken to yourself, and it was the biggest thing. You awakened to yourself when you were 23, you know? Is that the awareness? Is that what awareness means? You awaken to yourself?
Yeah, well, I was awoken in a brutal fashion, you know. I think that was programmed into my soul, but let's not even go there, because, you know, that might go too far. But what I try to do with other people, it doesn't have to be this brutal, you know. It's just about watching your thoughts. Some people call it meditation, whatever. But like at a certain point, when you watch your thoughts, and then you start watching what you speak, the words you're using, and then you start watching your actions, you will start to realize that the difference between what you are and what you're not, you know. In other words, you will start to realize, like, I'm influenced by my environment, my thoughts are not mine, and all these things. Just pay attention what you think, what you say, what you do. This is the work of awareness, so it doesn't have to be the brutal thing that I have experienced, you know.
It can be. So is it then a gradual process, or is it?
It can be a gradual process, yes. And in the beginning, it's annoying because you're not used to. You're used to being reactive. But the first 3 times you go to the gym, like, it hurts as hell too. So it can be just a practice. And at a certain point, you don't even need to practice, because it's part of your day, all day. You know, you're not losing yourself in all this madness, in obsessing about work or love, or you're not, everything that you do is conscious, it's intentional, you know? If you live like that, that's the path. But people, what I see, the life of the unconscious is just they use all their activities to run away from themselves, to get rid of their stress, their compression, you know? So all these unconscious actions, they lead to nothing. Because of that, because they're not conscious, they're escapism. There's some escapism is more sophisticated and whatever, but most actions that people do are just that. Yes. So I'm saying, just pay attention to you, you know, especially starting with your thoughts, you know. This is the simple work of awareness. And the longer you do it, the easier it gets. And then you'll start to see what I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. It starts to align. Integrity becomes natural, you know. And then the effect you have in the world is much more rapid, you know. Things show up much more rapid because you are now an aware being. You're no longer just this reactive being, you know. So
I'm going to ask you a very difficult question. You know, if you can solve this, you save humanity. But if, because I follow you, if awareness is or can be this gradual process, okay, and if there is such a strong tendency within the individual to escape, you know, not go there because it could be confronting. You know, I have the same issues as if I'm trying to speak to people about the mountain that they're not facing or the compromise that they're making. You know, I asked on my newsletter list, what have you been compromising lately? And I got 0 responses, you know? So if this is, you know, because that's part of the compromise is that you don't see it as a compromise. So part of the unawareness is that you're not aware of the unawareness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So at one point, and who is to judge, at one point can you say, I'm aware enough right now to have this relationship, so to speak.
When, like, we have an important tool to go towards awareness. It's called fear, you know. So it's not difficult to know what you're afraid of, because when it shows up, it's unmistakable. So the only thing worth doing before you reach like proper awareness is to work with your fears, to not run away from them, to go towards them and to face them. The only thing worth doing in this life before you wake up is working with your fear. And you can't just say, I didn't compromise, whatever, because everybody can see where your fears are. Yeah. You know, if you're claustrophobic, you step in an elevator, you freak the fuck out. In an airplane, there's many, you know, so the fears are the material that we have to work with. These are the indicators of unconsciousness, reactiveness, escapism. It's the only thing worth doing. So nobody can just say, oh, you know, I'm okay and I have no issues, because if you spend enough time with a person, that shit will start to come up sooner or later, you know. And if in my case I go into a relationship with a woman, it's the fastest way for me to wake up all her fears, her abandonment fears, her daddy issues, all that shit will come up at lightning speed. So that's why this tool works so good for me. Like, all that stuff comes up. I put a mirror right in front of her. She fucking hates it. She's trying to escape. So she's imprisoned between the attraction towards me and facing her own and running away from her own fear. I have the art in protecting her so she'll stay long enough. And then, yeah, she'll have to work with her fear, and that will liberate her like in a much faster pace. So nobody can say, oh, I don't know what I should be working on, because fear is a substance and it will always show up. The closer you get to another human being, or the closer you get to your desires or whatever, fear of failure or whatever, it will show up and you will not be able to deny it, because your whole body will react, you know?
What are, these days, what are your fears, Filip?
Well, I spend a decade doing nothing but working with my fear. My fears were people in general. I was extremely introverted. I was scared shitless of people. So I went into sales. I became a waiter. You know, I just pushed on that stuff. I was extremely scared of spiders. So I started catching spiders and looking at them and freaking the fuck out. And, you know, I was one bag of fear. I have to, like, there's unlimited amount of fears because of the way I was raised, you know, like,
What are
yeah,
you? What are you right now afraid of, or what do you? Let me ask you this. It may be hard, you know. What do you? What could be? What could be a fear? Since you're in, you want to attack this, and this is worth pursuing. What could be your next challenge? What could be that fear to address? What could be that
oh, the
threat
last
to
fear,
address right now?
the last fear that I faced, I was what happened to me, like to be locked up or to be not to be free, you know, to lose my freedom. So that was addressed against my will through all these lockdowns, you know. So yeah, that was an interesting one actually, because that was probably one of my main, like, freedom is such a big thing for me, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it was taken away from me in the most brutal way. So I guess that was the last huge one,
Are
which
you are you free from fear right now?
you can never really say what's still buried. You know, you're never 100%, but what you can be sure of, life will always bring it up for you. So if you have the courage to face it and to look at it, you can work with it. But you can never be 100% sure. But I trust life because life has always presented me with the next fear I didn't see, you know? Because let's face it, most fears are locked up in your unconscious or in your body, you know? That's why I always try to find ways to bring them up, you know? And travel is a good one, you know? You make yourself uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable long enough, something will come up. And it's your duty to work with it. And if you walk away from it, I'm sorry, but you walk away from life. You walk away from growth, inspiration, all the good stuff that people want. It's buried in there, you know, but you can always count on that. Life will present you with your fears, the leverage to work on. And that's my disappointment in humanity. Like, so many cowards there, you know, they're so busy escaping themselves with all their nonsense, you know. The only thing worth doing in this life before you wake up is to work with fear. It's the only thing worth doing, because all the other stuff will come and go. Because as long as you're unconscious, you will lose what you build. You will fucking lose it. You can't hold on to anything, you know?